We are recording. This is session 2 of Wednesday's Child and Seed in Conversations about Eating Disorders. And we have more questions in. So, Debbie, let's start with the first one.
Okay, kicking straight off with Sarah, who's emailed in, and she says, I am struggling with anxiety and guilt around drinking alcohol. I've transferred any obsession I have with food to alcoholic drinks. I'm constantly working out rules of when I'm allowed a glass of wine or a cocktail. I've set so many rules around it now, and it's making it really unenjoyable to live life at all, whereas I really used to enjoy a drink with my dinner. Any suggestions?
Mine would be, don't feel guilty about enjoying something. Definitely not. I mean, I know what sort of like Sarah's saying is about, you know, that anxiety around should she or shouldn't she. But at the end of the day, everything in moderation, as long as that is in her control, why shouldn't she enjoy a drink, and why should she feel guilty about having that as opposed to having something to eat, or vice versa? So my opinion is, you know, don't feel guilty at all. And I'm just wondering, Gemma, if you can sort of elaborate on that side of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've actually been doing a little bit the same as Sarah all of a sudden, and I don't know where that's come from. So it made me, when this question popped up, it made me think, oh gosh, like I've actually been sort of doing this, not to the level of Sarah, but you do start to question when the world seems to have stopped. You start to question if you're allowed certain things, like because if you warranted working hard enough, or if you done X, Y, and Z. And actually, I think people are grappling on to trying to find something to control, because there doesn't feel like there's a lot of control over what any of us are allowed to do at the moment, and we're being sort of fed different bits of information as and when, and it's very unclear territory for us all. So we all sort of go towards something that we think we can take control over. But what I made sure that I did to stop myself doing this was I challenged myself. So when I started having these thoughts of going, oh gosh, can I go for a glass of wine at 6 o'clock? Am I allowed to do that? I suddenly stopped and thought, hang on a minute. The rule book, there is no rule book. The textbook, there is no textbook for any of this. We're all living this day by day, and we need to start being kinder to ourselves and allowing ourselves to go through the motions. If one day I feel like, you know, because you've got to remember, back in the real world, my life particularly, if not when I was on tour, because I wouldn't drink before a show, obviously, professional, but if I had, say, a meeting like mid-afternoon, you know, it might often be in a bar or in a pub. And quite often, the person I was having a meeting with would go, oh, should we have a glass of wine? Should we share a glass of wine? And that was fine. You know, so that's that. Even though things have changed, if I get to 2 o'clock in the afternoon and think, do you know what? I've worked a lot this morning. I'm going to give myself the rest of the day off, and I'm going to have a glass of wine and read a book. You know, I think it's just being able to realise that we're all in the same boat, and that we just need to be kinder and go easier and cut ourselves some slack, as Debbie said last week. You know, that there's no textbook for this. So I think when she starts putting on those limitations on things, I think I would suggest to her, challenge it. And by that I mean just do it. You know, see how it feels, because actually you'll go, oh, do you know what, I really enjoyed that. I don't know what you think, Debbie.
Well, I think it brings up two things for me. I think one thing is about transference of obsessions and addictions and those kind of things. So I think one of the things around, once you've had an eating disorder, even if it's way back in the past, there's always that potential at any point in your life where there's a need to control or feel you're getting control. You can transfer that obsessive, addictive type behaviour to something and make it. I always say about kind of eating disorders, we put the food on a pedestal and we make it a, you know, a significant thing. And
Sorry, Ruby's getting in. Yeah.
So there's that element. The other thing I would say is I really believe with anything where we tell ourselves in life, I must not have that, I cannot have that, it's bad for me to have that, I'm really guilty if I have that, it's shameful to have that. The more we do it, the more we put it on the pedestal, we crave it, and then when we give in, we don't know when to stop. And we overconsume, and then it's just a cycle. So I think if she can just kind of say, do you know what, I fancy a glass of wine, I'm going to be really calm about it, but I'm not going to have it in a panic, in the dark, in my pantry, hiding behind, I am going to sit down like an adult, pour myself that glass of wine, and then I'm going to say that's enough, and then I'm going to go and run a bath. I'm going to step away from the bottle of wine. That would be
step away from the wine. I hope that helps, Sarah. It's not an easy one, like you say, but I think just remember you're not alone. Like, a lot of people are feeling exactly the same thing, regardless of whether they've suffered from an eating disorder in the past or not. So sorry, my dog's going mad. It's because we've just got really wet. she's trying to get dry. Anyway, second question.
Okay, so the second question comes from Carl, and he says, I'm trying my hardest to keep motivated, but I'm sat in front of a computer screen all day. I'm not being allowed to walk around, and it's really having an effect now. I'm bored, and if anything, all it's making me want to do is binge eat. It's got so bad that I am organising anything I can just to try and distract myself, but I'm really frustrated at where I'm at.
I think the first thing is, well done for trying to find distractions. I think that's a really positive step, that he's actually, acknowledging it, and he's trying to put things in place to help him. It's not easy. None of this is easy. When you're at home alone and you've not got anybody or anything around you to sort of help you, it can be very, when you're battling against your own demons, it can be very difficult. But I think he's already making the first big step by setting distractions and things that he can do. And, we are allowed to go out for a walk. We have got that leeway of that hour in the day to take ourselves off. And if he can, I know he's not at the moment, and I get that there are different people have different ways of feeling about going out for that walk. But if he can, even if it's just, I don't know, setting aside a new task or a hobby, and I don't mean all of this thing where everyone feels like they have to clean out the kitchen cupboards, because everyone's sort of doing that at the moment. I still haven't done the pantry,
I had a conversation this morning, and I was just saying, it feels like everybody out there wants to say, I'm learning to be a brain surgeon, I'm going to be an astronaut now, I've learned Japanese this week in lockdown. There's a lot of that, and I think we need to kind of go easy on ourselves around that stuff.
And we don't need to do that. It can be the simple things. It can be, one of the things that you've often spoke about, Debbie, is sort of writing a list of things that you want to focus more on, or things that you want to, in terms of self-care, like like goal setting, but nothing major, just little things that he can sort of think about. I don't know if that's something that might help him.
I'm just wondering as well, I wondered what setting Marg was actually referring to, because when this question came up, I'm thinking, is that in a work setting or is that in a home setting? What you've just said, Gemma, and Debbie, is really, really beneficial in a home environment, because we can distract and we can look for other avenues to sort of like focus on. But when maybe in a work situation, and whether people are coming into work or what environment is in, and that boredom takes over, that must be soul destroying, because that clock will tick, tick, tick so slowly until a shift is finished or until his hours are up. And how would you actually concentrate and help your mindset to deal with the situation he's in and the limits that it has to deal with that?
Yeah, we probably forget how difficult it is for people that are still at work right now, because there's so few staff in any office or work environment, unless obviously if you're in the busy NHS, that's completely different. But in certain circumstances, you're going to go from kind of, you'll only have 20% of staff perhaps left in an office, and so water cooler moments that kind of brighten your day, or nipping out for a coffee with your colleague, that's not going to happen, but you've still got the same number of hours to fill. So I can imagine that must be really, really frustrating. And that's where it allows any prehistoric eating disordered thoughts or unhelpful behaviours to creep in potentially. It's just too much time. And I think also the other thing it highlights for me is clearly if he's feeling that way, he's still in a situation of getting, he's got mental hunger. It's on his mind. He's not satisfying his body and looking after it and making sure he's nutritionally restored when he does go home and cook a meal. So perhaps he's either kind of underestimating how much he needs, or trying to be too restrictive still.
And the other side of that, Debs, is if he is at home, having that structure is so different to when you're at work, isn't it? So whether he's at home or out, I think maybe a little bit of advice, and I know it sounds really dull, and I remember back in the day, when I used to get told, set yourself a food plan or a food diary, but actually it really helps if he can pre-plan what he's going to have that day, whether he's going to the office or not. If he's at home, say for instance, still pre-plan those meals and make it as though this is going to be my pack up and this is going to be my afternoon snack, so it's all kind of there. So he's not like constantly, I keep hearing a lot of people saying about how working at home has been difficult, or having access to a very quiet staff kitchen is difficult, because they're just going in and getting bits, and by the end of it they're going, oh my god, I don't know what I've eaten, I don't know if I've eaten too much. Whereas I think if they can put some structure around it, whatever environment they're in, this is what I'm going to have for lunch, it's already been pre-made, even do it the night before, so it's still sort of a normal routine. I don't know if that might be something that might help him. I hope that helps. None of these questions, just I'm sure they're all aware, we haven't got any foolproof answers, because obviously everyone is different, but hopefully everything that we're saying can resonate in some way.
And I'd just add to that, if anybody else kind of listens to this and thinks they've developed a tactic or anything, just as much as this is about questions that people want help with, actually I'd also really love it if we could talk about the success stories that people have had and what works well for them.
That's amazing. That's a great idea. We'd love that.
So Paul, he got in touch with us over social media, and he said, this might sound really stupid. No, Paul, nothing sounds stupid. We've heard it all before. But I don't know how to talk to my daughter about her new body. I'm a single dad, so I always feel I'm a bit clumsy about the words I use to my children as it is. But now that my teenage daughter is in recovery and gaining weight, I want to congratulate her on her healthier look. But is that the right thing to do? Oh my goodness.
I've got an answer to that one.
Go for it, Marg.
Is it really necessary, unless his daughter is asking the questions about her changing body, is it really necessary to relate to that? That's the first thing. The second thing is, you don't have to refer to weight. You can refer to a jumper that they're wearing. That jumper really looks lovely. The colour really suits you. Or you could refer to a dress. I mean, I can remember the days when you used to come down ready and everybody would look and say, oh, you look lovely. It doesn't often happen now. But I know when Gemma comes downstairs, the whole room sort of, oh, you look lovely. But it's just that affirmation, I suppose, that they don't have to be a comment about the weight. It's about how they feel, and it could be the colour of the hair, or just simply, you look absolutely lovely. It's just enough.
I think you're so right. It's about kind of realising that actually we're more than just the weight that's carried on us, aren't we? And we have to find other ways to complement one another.
Yes.
I find it really, not now on the world of lockdown, but I am somebody who would stop a stranger and just say, I love your skirt, or oh my goodness, your hair looks amazing. I just feel that we don't do that in the world enough.
I know.
But having said that, I do understand. I can remember kind of stages where somebody might have said to me something like, oh, you're looking well, and that would be a trigger word. Yeah, exactly. And what they mean is that's a compliment, because they're no longer looking at you really emaciated. You may not have seen them for several weeks, and now you're looking slightly cheerier, less grey in your skin, and it's an absolute bloody compliment. And then you're going, what do you mean? I've put on weight? Oh my God.
Well mean. Yeah.
Oh, it just used to put me in a tailspin. Yeah. And nobody means to say anything like that as anything hurtful. They're hoping that it's going to cheerlead you on and encourage you to keep going.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Mum always used to say to me, because like you say, Debs, the well word was always so scary. Not now, but one of the things that me, Mum and Dad, I don't know if Mum remembers, but I think Mum and Dad would say, "Oh, you've got the spark in your eyes," and that always made me. I don't know what it was about it. It just reminded me that, like we were talking about, yes, I'm a person, and I always used to love that. Everything else, there were so many things, bless Mum and Dad, that were walking on eggshells with me as to what to say, but I always remember that was the comment that made me feel alive. So I don't know if that helps, but I think if you can, like you say, relate to his daughter as his daughter and not just about a number, that's so important. Picking the little things like the condition of their hair, or the look of the skin, all those sorts of things. For me, it was Mum and Dad always saying, "Oh, you've got that spark in your eyes," and that always just made me feel proud.
I think you're absolutely right. I think he needs to remove weight from the equation, not even have that as a centerpiece, because that's not what my daughter's about. But, occasionally, out of nowhere, just pull her aside, give her a hug and say, "Your hair is looking amazing, young lady. What are you doing with that now?" Do you realise how much your nails are growing? They're really
give me some tips.
Exactly, because all those things, they just kind of come from a light-hearted place, and they're not talking about weight, but they are perhaps referencing the things that are starting to come back.
And I think, going back to what you said, Debbie, we don't compliment people enough. And I can always remember doing a course many years ago with Maureen Schiller, and if people rejected a compliment, it was considered bad manners. And now if people give me a compliment, I go, "Oh, that's really kind, thank you so much," and I will look them in the eye and I will be absolutely genuine, and I will do it like you. I will go up to somebody and say, "God, your hair looks beautiful," and you don't have to go on about it. You just say, and hopefully they'll say, "Oh, thank you so much," but you mean it. And I remember last year when we went to we were so lucky, went to Ascot, and we were all done in our finery, and there was two people wound the windows down and just said, "You look beautiful." And I will never forget that. And it just put me up there, and I just felt a different person. It was lovely, so lovely.
Great. Well, our next one is from Kat. She emailed over and she says, "Everyone seems to be telling me how they're doing lots of exercise at home during lockdown and that they're changing their eating habits to be really healthy, cutting out certain food groups. It's now really triggering me. I don't say anything, but it makes me want to restrict again, even though I had been doing really well in recovery." I think we touched on that a little bit last week, didn't we, with some of the stuff we talked about this kind of behaviour around people feeling that they must do a certain amount during lockdown, and that there's a real kind of need for us to prove ourselves.
I think here's the truth of it: half and a quarter of them aren't. Half and a quarter of them aren't. A lot of my friends, this is obviously my friendship group, but a lot of them have actually gone the opposite. They're not doing nowhere near as much as they used to do. But the one thing that we all do in my friendship group, and I do for myself, is no good can ever come from comparing, because one of my favourite quotes is from Dr. Seuss: "Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive that is you within you." And
I love that.
It's just, Dr. Seuss is amazing, but it's so true. And even when I have those days where I go, "Oh, do you know what? I really don't feel like doing my workout today," I go, and that's all right, because that, for me, right here, right now, is not what I need to do. This whole lockdown isn't about finding, the new craze, or being the next Joe, whatever his name is, Joe Wicks. It's not about, becoming the next Ainsley Harriott. I have discovered cooking again, which I find really enjoyable. But it's not something that I'm sort of putting on other people. It's just my little thing. Like, and I know that, you know, my friend has sort of started to read again, and I know that somebody else has started to do a little bit of yoga, but it's what works for everyone. Yoga doesn't work for me. Don't want any part of it. I can't. She does a downward dog, my dog, I don't. But I think it's this thing of just trying to, and I'm guessing she's hearing a lot of these things through social media.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's one of the biggest problems, isn't it? If you're just watching that, she says everyone is saying, and I think, well, is that just your friendship group? Because actually, if your friendship group know you really well, they'd probably be a bit sensitive about that. So you're just probably watching some influencer on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. And they will get paid to be an influencer, and they will get paid by a brand. Like, all of what we are seeing right now in some capacity is absolutely amazing, because people are stepping up and being so authentic. I think the conversation about mental health is starting to filter through, and people are now sort of going, this is what I'm doing, I've done nothing. But there is still that industry that exists where, like you say, there's influencers and there's people who, you know, and that's absolutely fine, using this whole environment. They have to adapt and they still have a job to do. But we've got to, maybe the biggest piece of advice I can give on this is to try and step away from the phone and scrolling. I tend to keep away from it as well, because there's a lot of things that I don't really want to read about. And I just think, like we talked about a little bit last week, I think you've got to make sure that you put things in perspective and realise that not everything that you read is true, but also stepping away from it and realising that you are you, and to stick with how proud you felt to be doing, how well you were doing is what you should focus on, not anybody else.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think there's a need to remind yourself how far you've come as well, and to say, actually, for the sake of trying to echo what other people are doing, do I really want to go all the way back into that spiral of despair that my eating disorder gave me? Do I want to fall back into that trap? And we all know how quick relapse can happen if we allow it to. So it's just reminding yourself, you've come so far. Don't give it up now for the sake of listening to tittle tattle, which is exactly kind of what it amounts to, isn't it?
Yeah, don't forget all the hard work.
Yeah, there seems to be so much focus around exercise. And I mean, I'm disabled, so I can't exercise like other people do. I mean, I can't go for the walks and whatever. And that's fine. That's the way it is. But there's so many other things I get enjoyment out of. It doesn't have to be exercise. It can be what fulfills you and how you want to spend your time. That's what is important to people, not just about, running on the spot with, whoever's on the television at that time. It's about what fulfills you, and that doesn't have to be exercise.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So a family-based question next. So this one is from Liz, and she called to say she'd got a question, which was, should we back down or get angry at our daughter? I think this one's going to be for you guys. My husband and I are so frustrated with our 18-year-old daughter. She's struggled for the last 3 years with a restrictive eating disorder, but lockdown has made it worse. We don't know whether we should be giving in and tolerating her behaviours or doing more to challenge her.
It's a fine line. I think we mentioned this last week about boundaries. You have to have boundaries. And if the behaviours of the person with the eating disorder have consequences on other people in the house, then that has got to be addressed. So if the heating's going up to 30 and it's 21 degrees outside, the consequence of that is it affects other people. And I can remember going back to the days with Jen. And we had to sit and we have to have these conversations, but the communication was the key. It's okay to feel cold, Gemma, and we understand why you may be feeling cold. Let's look at what we can do about that. And it's about saying, about putting extra layers of clothing on, wearing a hat in the house, just having layers on so she feels warmer, and also to improve nutritional input. So it's about the whole picture, about how it affects other people as well. And the consequences of that is that, other people are feeling very uncomfortable in the house. They're feeling anxious because they can't cool down. And all these things come into play, and you must have boundaries. And whatever behaviour, my rule of thumb was, if you don't accept that behaviour without an eating disorder, then never accept it with it, because that has put us in good stead for a lot of things. And it's so easy to let things go and not to address things for the sake of not having an argument. But never ever argue about a situation when people are shouting and getting angry. It's got to be in a calmer environment, and it's got to be where, you know, people can actually express themselves without interruption, and they have the courtesy of listening to each other and not to fly off the handle. And we used to have a thing where we used to put our hand up, and it wasn't being dismissive. It was, whoa, let's stop this now, let's calm down, and when the time's right, we'll talk again. Because there's one thing that we learn: you can't solve anything in an argument. Okay, so it's about communication, and it's about consequences to other people because of their behaviours, and it's about what compromise can we come to and how can we go forward.
Yeah, I think you sort of hit on the absolute right point about safety and sanity of the others around you. And if anything that person is doing, regardless of whether they've got an eating disorder, whoever that child was, or the partner, the parent, you just wouldn't accept it if it's compromising somebody's safety or sanity. That's absolutely vital. Absolutely. And I think sometimes we can be, when we're feeling compassionate about someone who's struggling with an eating disorder, if we're not careful, we could go so far into sympathy and empathy, which are kind of absolutely necessary and are really vital for parenting. But we can go so far that way that we can let them rule the roost. And, you know, that's just devastating. It's not right for the marriage of the parents. It's not right for the other siblings that are in the house. Absolutely. It should not be allowed to control the family home, because ultimately that's that demon that we talk about, that kind of, it's not actually your child, it's the eating disorder. That eating disorder, that other party is controlling everybody and will ruin it if given an opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. Gem, have you got anything on that, love?
I mean, I do sort of think, God, it can't be easy. It just to sort of have, because the thing is, like, they'll be breaking their heart as well, because I don't know the context of how much she's restricting, but obviously there's the side of it where, medically, she needs to be, her parents must be frustrated, not just because of her, maybe the arguments and things, but also scared, because if she is restricting more and more, and I wonder if could a conversation come about, and again, we've touched on this before, but the art of communication and the way you phrase something and the way you go into a family discussion can change the whole course of how the end result is. If they sit down with their daughter and it's, you're doing this, you're doing that, this is this, that's that, and that's that, and it's all very challenging, like straight away she's going to be like, and especially with hormones at 18 years old, it's not an easy mix. But if they can maybe sit down, and one thing we always go back to, talk to their daughter as their daughter, talk to the person and express that, they know she's struggling. What can they do to help her? Also, can we be honest with you? We're struggling too. Seeing you be like this is not helping, and it's not a blame game, but it's not helping any of us, because this whole situation is pressure enough as it is. How can we work together and be kind to each other? So it's just maybe trying to find that moment of just giving it a shot, of sitting down and talking as people and humans, and always trying to factor everyone into the question. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense? Yeah. Rather than it being going, I need to sit down and I need to hear you say, like, you need to hear this and you need to hear that. Actually sitting down and going, right, we're all struggling. How can we help each other?
Do you know what? I found something that works really well when you're trying to avoid conflict and have a conversation with someone. I don't know whether you guys have ever heard this, but if you're doing something side by side to someone rather than face to face, it can often be really helpful. So, for example, if you went for a drive with someone and had the conversation, or a walk with someone, not that you're going to do an awful lot of that, but when you're side by side, so even if you were both together doing the task at the kitchen table, but you're side by side, something about our body positioning sometimes when we are across from you, it seems quite confrontational. So sometimes don't kind of necessarily find that opportunity to say, come and sit down in front of me and we're going to talk about it. Perhaps it is, come and help me at the worktop cut these carrots up, whatever it might be, and start that gentle conversation in a slightly easier way. And then I think one other thing is just making them think about, you know, just remind me again what your aspirations are and where you want your life to be, to remind them what the reason is to want to be well. Because that 18-year-old, I wonder whether part of what her stress and strife is right now is, I guess an awful lot of 18-year-olds had their term time at school just completely terminated in the middle of having studied for their A-levels. They're now, presumably that's the year group that going on to university, so she might have a university place, but she might have missed out on her prom and all her kind of doing the exam. She might be really quite freaked out by it all and actually a bit fearful. So perhaps the eating disorder is playing up to try and suppress her out of controlness that's going on right now.
There is an excellent book that we recommend, and it's called The Skills-Based Learning for Caring for Loved Ones with an Eating Disorder, and it's a book that has been written by Professor Janet Treasure, who is renowned for eating disorders and based within the London and South Maudsley Clinic. And they call the plan, if you like, and the tools, the Maudsley method. And we run courses and workshops in Hull for carers, and we call it Walking on Eggshells, and it is based on the Maudsley method. And if there's one thing that turned our family around, it was that book. And me going to London to learn the skills, to bring all those skills back, to then put it into practice and then roll it out for carers locally. And that's what I did. And it's the one thing that changed our family around. And also, the skills are transferable. And when we go about communication, it's about the environment, it's about the personal space, it's about eye contact or not eye contact, it's about respect, it's about allowing somebody to speak and not speaking over them. So there's all elements, and it's called positive communication, and there is a section in that book to actually help with techniques to do that. And you know, it might sound the easiest thing in the world to communicate, but by gosh, it isn't. To get it right, it isn't. So good luck. If you need any help, please just email, not a problem.
Excellent. So that's our questions for today.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful. Well, next time, I think next time, like Deb said, you know, if anybody wants to email in with any tips or any success stories as well, that would be fantastic. Not just how, you know, questions about their struggle, but if there's any sort of, like you said, Debs, if there's any sort of people that want to email in with how they're dealing with certain things and how something has helped them, that would be really great for us too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Until next time. And I'll try not to have a crazy dog.
Okay, keep safe, everybody.
Keep well.
Bye. Bye.